All right, what's going on, guys? Welcome to Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco. I am joined by the Convo Couch coming at us from Peru. It's great to have you guys on. Recently, there was an article that was slandering you guys. We're going to talk about that. But also, how are you and how is Peru?
We're good. We're good. We're busy. We're running on what is it? Running on thin
On
ice.
flames.
Yeah. And we're happy to be here, in South America. We're trying to get around to observing more elections and seeing what's out there. There's so much going on in Bolivia right now, Cuba. Venezuela's having elections. Honduras will be having elections. Chile's going to be having elections as well. And we're very much anti-imperialist, so we want to bring our anti-imperialist view, but also our election expertise to the global south. And our experience in Nicaragua was amazing, like Pasta says, life changing. And the people are some of the nicest people I've ever met. And they welcomed us with open arms, and we literally just pretty much said what we saw, right? And so yeah, I'm very happy to be doing this work. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for having us on.
Yeah, everything my partner said over there as well. As a gringo in Latin America for the first time getting his passport at 48, it's been amazing. And there's a lot of security in what we're doing because my partners are bilingual, and that's one of the things as we get into that whole article. I know we're going to break down. The first thing that Mr. Davis tried to get me on. Well, can you be assured that your translators are telling you the truth? I'm like, yeah, I live with my translators. I work with them for 4 fucking years now. They're my fam. I believe everything they say. Nice try, pal. Let's move on. But it's been an amazing experience. And like I've said this before, I really, at the end of the day, despite our political views, despite our anti-imperialist views, we didn't even care who was on the ballot, Franco. All we cared about was the process of the elections and the frame which work in which they operate on, and that was the most important thing to us, is to not only just observe the elections but to scrutinize them, and that's what the Convo Couch did.
Awesome. So let me pull this up here, but also before we move forward, I just want to know, have you guys received any censorship for talking about this election on YouTube or on Twitter or anything? Because I know that some videos discussing the censorship on Facebook against Nicaraguans talking about the election was happening, and people talking about it on YouTube, they were getting censored or demonetized. Has that happened to you guys at all?
I didn't post very much of that on Facebook. I'm going to post a few things now, and that's why I didn't do it, because I know Facebook was removing people's entire profiles. One of the people Caleb Maupin was with actually got his whole profile taken down. There were other journalists
Jeez.
that were there that got their stuff removed. So I've been sharing it on Twitter, and on Twitter none of that got taken down. So yeah, no, we haven't received anything on YouTube or Twitter. I just don't think, I don't know, maybe like the way we worded it or something, but no, we've been pretty lucky as far as that respect. I can't say it's going to be like that forever, because YouTube 6 months from now will find it and be like, oh, this is misinformation. But no, we didn't really, I didn't experience that. But what I did experience was a lot of the quote unquote, synthetic left, really siding with this imperialist sort of twist on Ortega, saying things like, oh, yeah, the Contras were bad and what happened in the 80s is bad, but Ortega is a thug, he's a dictator. And so it's that sort of same weaponization that I've seen, for instance, with Bashar al Assad in Syria. That's sort of like, yeah, 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 it's not what the United States says, but this guy's still a thug. And that allows an entryway into regime change imperialist
Yeah.
propaganda. And I saw that also when Rokana went on Katie Halper's show. And why are we entertaining, first of all, the idea of imperialist propaganda? Why are we even giving it credibility? Was my issue with Halper having on Rokana, not just to grill him at all. It was more of like to have him argue with Aaron Mate about how it's propaganda, and Aaron Mate wasn't even in Nicaragua. So it was just like the way the left in like America, even the independent quote unquote media left, progressives, whatever, the way they still look at elections and the way they still look at imperialist propaganda is really just, it's really not good, especially from the perspective of journalists in the global South. They say there is no left in America, and I have to agree with them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like Fiola said, we witnessed certain people who got their channels taken down. One of those guys was Tim Harris, another election observer who kind of understands the process of elections. And then, of course, Caleb, and there was other people. I believe his name was Mr. Sweeney from Great Britain, who didn't even get a chance to come over. He was detained in Mexico and then eventually went back to England because he couldn't make it here for the Nicaraguan elections. And they really didn't give him any rhyme or reason. They just detained him for whatever reasons. And they were also doing the whole COVID testing situation. People were delayed in getting there. So there was some censorship going on. I'm surprised we really didn't get it censored as much like these other journalists and stuff, because the information that we put out there is very unique, where it just concentrates on the actual process and framework. You know, I have at the top of my Twitter, I have a video that has almost 20,000 views, and I'm very thankful for that. But in that video, it explains the differences between the elections in Nicaragua, which are way more representative and for the people than the American elections, which have no chain of custody, which are run by corporate entities. So I think there's a little shadow banning going on. You can never really judge that, but we haven't experienced like the full throttle censorship that some of our colleagues and some of their observers did get.
Yeah, and shout out to Caleb Maupin, who's also a friend of the show. I didn't know his Facebook got taken down. That slipped by me. I also wasn't really paying.
It was his one of the people who came with him.
Okay,
one of
so
the
one of his
observers with
affiliates.
him, part of his team. Yeah.
Okay, someone from the Center for I forgot what the name of his organization is.
His name was Keaton.
Center for Political Innovation.
Yeah. Center for Political Innovation. I also wasn't paying attention to well, I pay more attention to Caleb, but I didn't know Katie Halper had on Ro Khanna to debate Aaron Mate. That sounds like they're sensationalizing what's happening in Nicaragua more than informing what's actually happening. But I don't know. That's my take before even watching it, so I can't really judge. But from what it sounds like, that's the sense that I get. So,
you know, something, Franco, the thing he said too that was just, I have to point it out. The main thing he said that just blows your mind. He goes,
"Ro or Aaron?"
No, Ro Khanna. I'll agree that, you know, some of the sanctions aren't properly targeted. I was like, what the hell did you just say, you imperialist idiot? You just said targeted. That you agree that some of the targets aren't properly targeted? The F out of here.
Even the people that are anti-Ortega understand that the sanctions hurt not Ortega. They hurt the working people of Nicaragua. Exactly. And again, we're going to talk about this probably, Franco, but the elections by the opposition, by the words of the opposition, and there were 6 candidates on the ballot for president that we observed in the location we were at in Bilwi. Even those people were like, yeah, the election was run fair. So a lot of this propaganda, you know, trying to frame, and I have an article coming out, hopefully I'll let you guys know when it does come out. You know, there are 3 things that the imperialist propaganda machine focused on. One, it was to paint Daniel Ortega as a thug for jailing his opponents, which didn't happen. The second part was to paint him as highly unpopular by the people of Nicaragua, which was completely untrue. And then the third was to pretty much use those 2 agendas to try to undermine the validity of the elections via the OAS and via these, you know, CIA front totalities and organizations, and say that the journalists that were there were not critical of the process, and they were upset that the OAS and the legacy media weren't allowed, but there was no legacy media to be found. And so they used the propaganda that no candidates were allowed to advertise, which was also entirely false.
Is it
our good friend from Sputnik, Wyatt Reed, he got attacked by Keith Olbermann for simply just showing banners all over the place of the opposition. They were everywhere, Franco. It was almost like when George Galloway talked about Venezuela. Well, Capriles is more caprice than caprice, right? Like, you're more caprice than caprice. The opposition had plenty of chances. They were out there. They had banners all over the place. And, you know, we got there during the rest period because Nicaragua on Wednesday has a rest period where the parties are no longer allowed to advertise. Like Ortega wasn't on TV or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? Until after the elections.
It was also COVID related that they didn't
Mhm.
have any candidates for anybody going around like campaigning like normally would happen. Yeah.
A couple about 4 days before the election. So I mean, but you know, it's just ridiculous that people will put out there that it was like, oh, he eliminated all his competition and that's why he won. It's bullshit. The people of Nicaragua, the majority of them, love Daniel Ortega because he gives their people their due. He gives them things like roads, electricity, food, resources. And I've said this before. I said it on a tweet. If any American president has done what Daniel Ortega has done for their people, they would do for us. They would get elected for 10 consecutive terms.
And is this true or not? Like, if these legacy media, they have the funds to send somebody there, right? And they wouldn't be kicked out of Nicaragua, or they wouldn't be excluded from anything that's happening there during the elections, now would they? If they were to
No,
go?
they wouldn't be excluded. Obviously, they'd be looked on with more suspicion because we know
Yeah.
that the legacy media manipulates propaganda and narrative manages for the, for the State Department and for our, national security state apparatus. We know this, but they would still be allowed and show to go there. I mean, they could have come to the press conference we all had at the end, where it was translated. It was English and Spanish. Both, and Margaret Kimberly was there, and a lot of the election observers were there. We were there, people from Sputnik, people from RT, people from Press TV. Of course, all the people that are vilified by the media, right? And they're like, oh, so Russians are tied now to Nicaragua. And it's like, yeah, well, Nicaragua's going to find solidarity or an alliance with a government that isn't trying to overthrow them. So, of course, that's going to happen. But they were nowhere to be found at all. Nowhere to be found. The only people that were there were the people that I just mentioned. And again, the only people that wouldn't be allowed in there are the OAS and people trying to really control Nicaragua's elections, because Daniel Ortega, in one of his speeches when he won, where we were at the Plaza de la Revolucion, he basically said, we will never allow the United States or the OAS to try to gain control of our elections ever again. And so an entity like the OAS wouldn't be allowed because we know what they're there to do.
It's given the history of what they have done, even up until recently, the OAS in the United States. So let's just start here with this Business Insider article again, written by Charles Davis. Let's start with the title. Nicaragua paid for American YouTubers, you guys, to observe an election that critics say was a sham. How much were you paid by Nicaragua?
I'm still waiting for my check. You know what I'm saying? Listen, we had to pay for our own flight. They helped out with the hotel room and some food and stuff like that. But if you add up the dollars and cents, it's like $700 paid for the voice of the Convo couch is what they're trying to say.
And let me just really be specific here. The Nicaraguan government did not pay for us at all. It was just a delegation of people that are election observers that were there to have a lot of people there to be election observers because they wanted to show, to foreigners that the election was fair, transparent. And so that's who did it for a lot of people, journalists from all kinds of media, independent media, obviously, and just election observers that have gone to Venezuela before, that have done this numerous times, that have been in Nicaragua numerous times, that were there in 2018. So it wasn't the Nicaraguan government in any way, shape, or form. But the foreign ministry that kind of helped and led us through and said, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how this happens. And it wasn't, we didn't get any sort of compensation to be swayed in any way, shape, or form. And the fact that this idiot discussed this and brought this up, and I've told Pasta this, I wouldn't have ever even entertained his discussions about this, because that's not what this is about. This is about people observing elections to make sure they're fair and transparent. But this is what they go after because they want to find a gotcha to discredit your journalism, to discredit the election via discrediting you as somebody that has been swayed. And it's hilarious because considering the fact that CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times are literally paid by the corporate entities that own our government to put out propaganda to push regime change and imperialism all over the world, and they want to talk about us being swayed. We're not getting paid thousands of dollars to sit and pontificate about why sanctions are good, and that's why they do this, because they want want to pretend that we're them, when they know that they can be bought. A lot of journalists are bought, so they want to pretend that we're the same when we're not. We're actually doing the work that they have failed to do.
It is funny because, like Fam said, he's the one who's getting paid for this narrative right now. He's the one working for Business Insider. And to be honest with you, I didn't think he was going to play this angle. Even in the beginning, I kind of figured it out when he was starting to ask these stupid questions. I'm like, hey, Charles, are we going to talk about the election process whatsoever? And he had a couple other gotcha questions that didn't work. And we'll go over that as you go into the election. But this is just an absurd joke over here to say that we got paid. You know what I'm saying? These trips still cost us money. You know what I'm saying? It would be easy for us financially to stay put, stay in our studio, do our shows, and do reporting from afar. We wanted to observe this with our own eyes, being election integrity activists, to go and see the process and how it works. That's what we wanted to do. So the title itself, and Ricky Rance put, it's 3 lies in one fucking title. Absolutely. We're not American YouTubers. You know what I'm saying? We didn't get paid. And critics that say it's a sham didn't even get off their ass and go over and see it.
So, did they do this kind of stuff to people like Ben Norton and Max Blumenthal of the Gray Zone, also saying that they get paid by Maduro and Daniel Ortega, or when they go to another country in the global south to report on what's happening there on the ground? Nothing came from Ortega directly out of his pocket to you guys. Nothing came directly from the government to you guys. You guys said it was the foreign ministry that paid journalists like you guys to oversee, and they're not tied at all to Nicaragua?
It was the I'm honestly, like, it was the election observer entity that did
Okay.
this for all the election observers. It wasn't the it's our Ortega government. But I mean, at the end of the day, their government does fund a lot of governmental facilities and stuff, but we're not funded by the Sandinistas government in any way, shape, or form. And if we were, I would disclose that, but we're not. And the fact is that the process was completely obviously shown to us by members that were of the community when we went to Bilwi. It was the people of that municipality and that region that were showing us, whether they were Sandinistas or not, I don't know, but they were just members of that community. And that's one of the autonomous regions, which we can talk about in a minute. But that those people weren't like saying, hey, you need to support the Sandinistas. There was never any sort of, oh, you need to support the Sandinistas. You need to, you need do my politics align with the leftist sort of socialist type of government? Yeah. But I mean, if I saw that there was something going on in the election that shouldn't have been going on, I would say it. I would have talked about it.
And for the record, too, we paid for our own flight to get there. Putting us up in a hotel room that's equivalent to a Holiday Inn and a few meals is ridiculous to think that you can buy off anybody. You couldn't buy off a poor person with that, a homeless person with that. You know what I'm saying? So it's ridiculous that they put that out there. But it's kind of funny because it's the only avenue they got to scrutinize this election. It's the only thing they could say. What else could they say? This guy is just he's a capitalist mainstream media cuck. Let's be honest.
And would you guys say like corporate media is in the U.S. is equivalent to pretty much U.S. state media, considering who controls the country, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Like, that's what I mean. Like, corporations own our government, and these corporations own the media. So isn't that a conflict of interest? Whereas, like, we're going over there as foreigners, we're still treated as foreigners. We're not, we're still foreigners. We're not Nicaraguans. We don't even live there. We enjoyed it there. We thought it was awesome. I would totally live in Nicaragua. I mean, in Managua, that was amazing. The people are great. It's way cheaper to live there than it is to live in the States. They're growing and everything, but it like this whole idea that we're somehow, swayed in any way because of the treatment by the foreign ministry and the the people overseeing the delegations, which, by the way, the delegations included people from Code Pink, different groups from CPI, different countries. There was, I mean, people from all over the world. I mean, Ortega did in his speech thank all the observers that came in and monitored the elections, because the whole point is they have nothing to fear. So they're showing everybody how fair their elections are. If they didn't do that, like the United States does, right, where they don't allow anybody to come look at their elections, where they don't allow
It's
journalists to
private.
come
You're
in.
not allowed to see the process. It's private.
Exactly.
It's owned by the corporations. And I also want to just add that I felt safe. I really did. I felt safe in Nicaragua. My first time there, I had butterflies getting off the plane. But amazing country, amazing people. And, there were people who talked to us, like a lot of cab drivers and everything like that would say they weren't really in line with Daniel Ortega. But at the end of the day, they didn't want America getting involved. They didn't want all these other entities coming in. They wanted the right to determine what goes on in their own country. And they were free to say that. I mean, look at there's a press people in your cab, and you feel free to say, yeah, I don't agree with Daniel Ortega. I mean, you could say those things. It's nothing like the mainstream media makes it out to be. It's nothing like that whole Biden administration and even the Trump administration make it seem to be like he's some crazy dictator. He is not a dictator. He won that election fair and square because the people support him for what he has done.
Yeah, how can he be if he's democratically elected? And once again, it was overseen by all you guys, all you YouTubers who oversaw the election. Yeah, we broke down Biden's statement with Ramiro, who's in the chat right now. Shout out to him, who has his own show. We were covering the election. We showed a lot of clips of you guys there on the ground. But yeah, Joe Biden calls it a pantomime election, and you guys are there right now in Peru. Peru's left-wing government agreed, saying it didn't even meet the minimum criteria for a free and fair vote. I'm very disappointed in the direction that Pedro Castillo is heading in. Do you guys have any comments about that? And what are you guys seeing there in Peru right now?
Yeah, so when you try to please everybody, you end up pleasing nobody. And I think that's something Pedro Castillo needs to learn. We're here. I want to contact members of his party and ask questions. That's one of the reasons I wanted to come here, because I saw, when I saw that statement coming out from him, it just screams, complete and total, not even co-option as much, but weakness, giving in, right? And a lot of people who are living here, I have family members that were just here yesterday. They pretty much said that the power of the business class here, the upper class, the wealth, is too strong in the government. They're not allowing Pedro Castillo to do anything, and he's folding very quickly. But the thing is, if people elected you as somebody that's going to fight, you should be ready to fight. He doesn't have the experience. He I think he didn't think he was actually going to win. And so he hasn't surrounded himself with the right people, and the people he initially surrounded himself with have left or have been pushed out.
Them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so now he's like alone, and one man alone cannot do that, cannot change such a powerful entity. And especially in Lima, the power of the la clase empresaria, or the business class, the upper class, is way too strong. There's not enough people here who are on the left to really counteract that. And any sort of counter of that is labeled as terrorism. It's labeled as communist terrorism still, because especially in Lima, that specter of communism, the fear of that is so strong. So I am also disappointed. I am looking for answers from the Castillo administration, and we want to see what other people are saying, what other Peruvians are saying, who were supporters of him, and the ones who aren't, if they're more okay with what he's doing now, because he's sort of going to the center with this sort of, double talk. And it's unfortunate, but it's not actually surprising to a lot of Nicaraguans, because they kind of saw this coming. They have been very hypervigilant when it comes to a lot of the nations folding, because I spoke to one of them, and his name is Sergio, and hopefully we'll have him on the show. And he was talking about how, we really don't have Peru We really don't. And Bolivia is in danger because Evo Morales is no longer in power, and the OAS wasn't kicked out of there by Luis Arce. So then, and Chile has he's not really super leftist. He's kind of like a progressive brand going against the fascist, right? So it's like a AOC type going against this guy. So they don't have Chile. And Lula, they don't really look at as somebody as revolutionary as other people think, but it would be good if Brazil, if he won that election. And then we have Cuba, always in danger but still maintaining strong. You have Venezuela, constantly smeared and their economics in disarray because of the sanctions. And then you have Nicaragua. So even though there's a lot of potential there for a revolution to happen in Latin America, it's just still very difficult because of the U.S. and their allies constantly trying to thwart and undermine those governments.
The crazy thing too is Franco coming here for the first time is, and even in Nicaragua, seeing a lot of American businesses, seeing how the dollar is still tied to Latin America is a little surprising. I think there would be a little bit more of a distance, but it's not. And you can honestly understand why. I talked to some Peruvians in the restaurant the other day, and they were like, "Hey, did you like Pedro Castillo?" And they're like, "Nope, we don't like him at all." I'm like, "Did you like Daniel Ortega?" And they're like, "Yep." And I was a little confused by that, but they feel that Daniel Ortega has guts to take on the empire, whereas they feel that Pedro Castillo has immediately capitulated and backed down. But, when you see American politics and you understand American politics very well, you understand that Joe Biden is really not in charge. He's just a puppet doing what he's doing. So the same thing might be emulated over here in Peru. I'm trying to learn more about the process, but by talking to people and just watching how things unfold, and this statement, the fact that they said that the elections weren't even good, Pedro Castillo and that whatnot, it is surprising, but you can understand it because you can feel the corporate entities kind of hovering over your back simply by the way you spend money over here. The American dollar is still the dominant dollar, and everybody has it over here. You know what I'm saying? They trade it in all the tourists, whatnot, and it's very easy, accessible to move it into soles. You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't surprise me on what's taking place in Peru. But I also want to point out, too, as well, because Fam mentioned Cuba, she mentioned Venezuela, Maduro, and now Nicaragua. All eyes are on Honduras coming forth in a couple weeks because Manuel Zelaya's wife is running. And as we know, Manuel Zelaya had the cojones to take on the empire and give his people, roads, education, school, whatnot, and defy the corporations. He did it so well that the Americans backed a coup and removed him in the middle of the night while he was in pajamas to get him out of office. So right now, the important elections coming up, I know they're important in Venezuela and Chile, but in Honduras, that's where we have to keep our eyes on the 28th, because if Manuel Zelaya's wife can get in, that will change things in the global south. And it will also be a great ally for Nicaragua and help them and assist them when it comes to trade throughout the global south.
But I gotta mention that is a very difficult election for them to win because the current government is extremely neoliberal, and it's definitely an uphill battle.
It's a lot of nuance. As a severe amount is left out of here in that sentence. They're trying to say, like, look at this legitimate left-wing government of Peru is saying that the elections in Nicaragua are a sham and they don't agree with it. But there's so much history to take into account there for why Peru is in the position that they are in. They're barely a left-wing government right now. Pedro Castillo is not even a year in as president. And, we just discussed the pressures that he's facing right now. Then the article goes on to say that you, Pasta, were called up and invited by the Nicaraguan government to observe what critics say was a formality. So did you receive an invitation from Ortega or the government?
No, we didn't. We went along with Caleb Maupin. He was, we had talked to him. We'd asked if he would like to get the Convo Couch aboard to go ahead, and he reached out. They were already talking to him. Caleb's done stuff like this before, so he kind of made the introduction, and the Convo Couch went out that way. So we never dealt directly with the foreign ministry. We were actually going with Caleb in a way, but we were our own entity. But they knew exactly who we were. They knew we were going to come and scrutinize these elections, and that's why they said, okay, come on in. So that is kind of like a false statement.
Kind of. Yes, totally. I wouldn't even say
it's a false statement.
Yeah. But it's funny because they mentioned that there, and then they say that over here what you just said, that Caleb Maupin is who invited you guys. And then they mentioned he's a commentator at RT, the Russian state broadcaster. Moscow is a close ally of the Nicaraguan government, as if like we gotta look out for the evildoers in Russia, right? That are trying to help Ortega maintain his power as this dictator.
It was funny because it says no one's quite sure what Caleb Maupin's relationship is with Vladimir Putin. So blah 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 blah. And then there was a meme up that somebody put up on the thing when Caleb just blew this up and said, "What a joke!" And it was Putin on the phone. Says, "Caleb, they are on to you on the Convo couch. Unfortunately, we have to change our plans. The Business Insider is on to you on the Convo couch. They know you're trying to infiltrate." Like as if he has a line to Vladimir Putin. That's a friggin' joke. But you know what, Franco? It's all they got. It's all they got. They went on to kind of scrutinize us, me and Fee, and what we do to try to smear us. But they got nothing because these elections here are sound. And if we had elections like this that emulated Nicaragua in America, 95% of that Congress would be gone, and we wouldn't be jockeying over which donkey at the top we had to vote for. It would change the whole spectrum and remove the predator class out of play and actually give representative government to the people. And that's just the truth.
Yeah. It's funny how they paint Putin as this James Bond villain, and then everybody who's affiliated with like Russia or RT are like his little minions that do his bidding. It's what they're doing here is they're accusing you guys. They're accusing their enemies of doing exactly what they're doing, what they're guilty of. Like the U.S. here, as what was described in this Gray Zone article, the U.S. funds all these outlets in Nicaragua, and they have this massive campaign out to paint Nicaragua to be this dictatorship. So I just wanted to bring up here how they mentioned how La Prensa, they fired 200 employees in mid 2018, and how the owner is this guy named Chamarro, and his family are all, including the owner himself, is a big supporter of Trump. And we discuss on our shows how it's a two-party illusion. Both parties are owned by the same people, and it's their goal to coup all these countries, to take power away from the people in the global south so that they can extract resources from those countries. So you guys have any comments on that, on how they accuse their enemies of doing the things that they're guilty of doing?
Yeah, well, I just want to say, shout out to Ben Norton for being there for from the Gray Zone. Ben lives there, so he has a history. He has the history down pat. One of the things that those people try to do is not only buy and influence the propaganda machine there in Nicaragua, but they also try to completely start entire narratives that are false. For example, the narrative that he was jailing his opponents, that Ortega was jailing his opponents, none of those people were actually candidates. They were would-be candidates. It would be like, I'm a would-be candidate, Pasa's a would-be candidate, Johnny's a would-be candidate. They never filed the paperwork to be actual candidates. And the reason they're behind bars is because during the 2018 bloody coup that was backed by the United States, the attempted coup that failed miserably and was a loss for the United States. During that time, the Daniel Ortega actually gave amnesty to a lot of these coup plotters, to the dismay of many of his Sandinistas supporters who wanted them to pay a price. He gave them amnesty under the one condition that they do not try to overthrow the government again, or accept money from foreign entities to do that. Well, they absolutely did it again, and they were receiving funding from U.S. and Western backed entities and NGOs, and they failed to reveal where their money was coming from, and so Daniel Ortega called them vendepatrias, sellouts of their own country, essentially. And he said, they're there in prison because of that. And they were not actual candidates. But if you read the mainstream media in Nicaragua, the mainstream media in Peru, the mainstream media all over Latin America, and of course the mainstream media in the United States and the West, then you'll see, how, I'm a progressive, I'm a leftist, but it's wrong to jail your opposition because they fall for this sort of thing without looking at really why those people were jailed and who they really are. And one of the things you have to commend Nicaraguans for doing is not allowing a figurehead like a Juan Guaido that arose in Venezuela. They actually did a really great job of preventing a Juan Guaido type of figure from rising out of the Nicaraguan opposition, something that has allowed, people like Juan Guaido in Venezuela to act like there's some sort of, political prisoner that is being, mistreated by Maduro. So I think it's important that we point that out.
And when you talk to people, well, yeah, he jailed the opposition. Well, who did he jail? What person? I don't know, but I know it's his opposition. Oh, really? You don't know the person's name or what's going on? No, I was just told by, the New York Times that he jailed all his opposition. And that's something that Charles David, when he tried to corner me in this interview, when I was talking about the whole process, he goes, yeah, well, it seems like a fair process and it seems legit. But even with a fair process, if you eliminate all your opposition and you jail them, then of course you're going to win, even with a fair process. I said, come on, Charles, you know damn well that the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, which is anything but that, is at it again and was funding these pre-candidates that weren't even registered to go and try and overthrow the government. And we have a great interview with Ben Norton. It's on our Rockfin. It's on our YouTube. Please go check it out because we go in this in detail. And we have the receipts. He presents them. But also something I want to point out too as well. It's not just about resource extraction, us going in and using our imperialism to overthrow these governments. It's also about making sure people go and use the United States monetary system through austerity measures. So the corporations, using the banking system over here, making sure that stays still because it's about control. And it's also too, and I believe this too, and this is an opinion, but I think it's a very well backed opinion. The empire doesn't want socialist governments to thrive and show that the American people can have it better over here when they are provided with education, when they are provided with healthcare, where their taxes go to things that the actual people need rather than being spent on the military and imperialism all around the world. That's something that the empire doesn't want Americans to see.
So they went to jail pretty much for doing something illegal then. Isn't that considered illegal, colluding with a foreign country to try to overthrow the country's government?
In any country, but especially in the United States, right? I mean, okay, look at what the United States government tried to paint as a violent coup and an insurrection. The clown show on January 6th with a bunch of Trump supporters that were there justifiably angry because they felt like the election was taken from them and they had a right to question the election, even if I don't agree with their ideology. And they were there protesting. And of course, some people took it to the next level. We know this FBI PSYOP was done by design. And so that is what the United States government used to not only call it a coup and an insurrection and make it equitable to, or, like to make it equivalent to 9/11, but they also used it to attack our civil rights and our civil liberties, to label everyone as a domestic violent extremist. So if the United States government labels a clown show like January 6th a violent coup, and then chastises a Nicaraguan government for the 2018 coup, right? When people literally died, people were murdered in the streets. And then Daniel Ortega is like, I don't want this to happen again, so I'm going to take the precautions of putting these people in jail who, once again, are trying to overthrow a democratic election. How does the United States have any standing whatsoever on any of this just based on that principle alone?
And could you imagine, Franco, like Iran or North Korea sponsoring a candidate to run for president in the United States?
Oh my God, massive
Well,
outrage.
that's the thing.
Or
They
would
try
be
to make
jailed.
it like Putin.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh no, I was just gonna say they would be jailed.
Yeah.
Here in the States.
In a heartbeat. They tried the Russian, Putin's puppet was Trump and stuff like that with no strings attached, no money, no nothing, just a bullshit story. But can you imagine Iran and North Korea trying to fund a candidate in the States? It's absurd that they're going at it this way. Daniel Ortega, and let me tell you something, Daniel Ortega in 2018, he exercised restraint. He didn't send in, just like Fam said, the Sandinistas were ready to go. Our friend Sergio out there, who we are going to have on our show eventually to talk about the history and other things going on. The Sandinistas were biting at the tongue, like, let us go out there, let us crush this. And Daniel Ortega said no. Kind of what Xi Jinping did in Hong Kong. They showed restraint to let the people see what the American empire is fueling, the bloody coups, the bloody death that they are fueling. And because of that 2018 insurrection that they tried to attempt, the coup attempt in Nicaragua, it pretty much handed Daniel Ortega the election. That's why he got 75% of the vote, because they saw the other side of the coin and said, we've already lived under neoliberal governments. We've seen the corporations, what they do. We're not going to have it again. And that's why they're standing by Daniel Ortega. The American empire went all in with a jack high and got their fucking bankroll taken from them. And that's why Daniel Ortega won this election in a landslide.
So pretty much also they're jailing these people to protect the people, to protect their will, because you're gonna go against the will of the people by allowing these candidates funded by the U.S. and stuff to overthrow the government. Like that's going against what the people want. So it's protecting those people, right? Is there anything else in this article that you guys want to point out here and you guys want to debunk? Yeah, there wasn't too much here. Like it was
just fluff.
It was fluff. It was a short article. Now let's talk about the process of the elections in Nicaragua. How was the process, and how would you compare this to the U.S.?
Decades ahead of the U.S. I mean, the process was extremely organized and structured. That's one of the things I noticed about Nicaragua in general. They're pretty organized and they're pretty structured, and that's something that a lot of Latin America lacks. And I've seen the like even in Peru, like by all standards, Nicaraguan elections are more transparent in general that I've seen. I mean, the only other election process that I've been told and I have, observed from afar that I would like to go eventually soon is the Venezuelan process. But in terms of the Nicaraguan process, let's just get out the basics. They have one day of voting. It was Sunday, so, people were mostly free, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. roughly, or a little bit before that if there was nobody in line. They also had no vote by mail, no drop-off boxes, none of that sort of thing, all paper ballots. And the process was extremely focused on identification and duplicate voting, because when you get there and you enter into this voting center, which are all schools, they're all elementary schools or high schools, or they're schools, and so you go in there and you'll find the people with computers there looking up people's identity, matching their identity to their junta, which is the room where they're going to vote. And so they match their identities there, or people can look up their room on the walls, because they have them on the wall as well if you want to go do that. Or people can look them up online from their phone on the internet. When they put in their identification number, they can find it as well. So once they do that, there are also election supervisors there. There's the helpers of the election supervisors called a procurador electoral, and then there's also the policía electoral that's allowing and monitoring who comes in and out of the rooms. And then once you go into the rooms, there is the two people that are the helpers of like the president of the elections, and then behind them there is the political party representation. Mostly there was like 2 or 3 people that we saw that were representing the political parties. So there was a Sandinista, there was another party and another party that were usually there. But when you go up to the table and you face the table that you're in, they once again look you up based on your identification, and they have pictures, literal pictures of your ID. So they have to match the picture of you to that picture of the ID. And then you go vote, and they give you the form and they give you the ballot, which is the ballot is what we saw, how we knew that people weren't kept out of the ballot, that he didn't, jail his opponents. They were all in the ballot. And then you go and you vote. It's via paper ballot. You drop it in the box, and then after that, you get your finger marked with a black ink that doesn't go away for days, and that's how they know that you voted and that you can't go vote again.
Yeah. Also, I want to point out, and Fam just hit that so beautifully too, as well, that the parties in the room are also part of the counting process. It's not like what we saw in the United States, where they were throwing a lot of Republicans out of the room. They were putting shit on the windows so you couldn't see in there. So all the parties that were there are present. You know what I'm saying? Some of the smaller parties that ran on the top of the ticket didn't have enough representation to put somebody in every junta, but for the most part there were 3 parties in each junta that were watching, and they were able to observe the counting process. So therefore you have accountability, because these elections, they're very accessible. And when I talk about accessibility, a lot of people in the States, well, we need 15 days to vote, we need to have mail-in ballots, God bless you, to everybody on the roster. That's not the accessibility I think we should be looking for. The accessibility is the time it takes to vote. It's got to be easy and simple to get in and out, especially in America, where, you know what I'm saying, you have babysitters, you have work, you have a couple jobs and stuff like that. You got to be able to get in and out. Well, we clocked somebody 8 minutes and 43 seconds. That was at a busy vote location. Johnny caught some people 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatnot. And you know what I'm saying? And these elections are accessible that way. That's the real form of accessibility we need. They are accessible, they are trackable, they are transparent, and they are publicly verifiable. You know what I'm saying? Because they do this where they counting process, where they count in each junta at a local level, and then they take all those local counts, move them to the municipal level, do a count over there and add the municipal level. Then they go to the region and they add them up over there, and then they take them to the national level, the center in Managua. So you could track down the voting all the way down to each junta. So it's very trackable and publicly verifiable. You can verify these things. And if an audit needs to take place, all the paperwork is there. It is right there. We're waiting to hear from the foreign ministry how long they have to hold on to the paperwork. In America, you're supposed to hold on it for 22 months. Now, you won't see this on mainstream media, Franco, but talking to my connections and my people in Georgia, talking to my people in Wisconsin, there is so much paperwork that is supposed to be kept for 22 months that isn't there. In other words, 75% of the ballot boxes in one county in Georgia, they don't even have it. Who picked it up, when they brought it there? They don't even have this paperwork right now. It's a friggin' mess across the board. That's not the case in Nicaragua, because they make it easy to track these things and make it easy to verify them. And in case a party wants to audit it, all the paperwork is there. They make sure that their elections are strong when it comes to security and accessibility. Now, the one thing I do want to talk about is that we did see, and it's kind of amazing. It's so, like, you go, wow, these people take voting so serious. There is no mail-in ballots for people who are handicapped. They have to come there. But when they get to the polls, the help they give these people, I think it was Camilla from Casachuan News, showed the way they picked up a wheelchair and walked it upstairs for the lady to get in the room and then help her out to get in there so she can vote. We saw people with canes, walkers, wheelchairs. We talked to people with wheelchairs. They went to vote, and it's just amazing to see that.
They expedite the process for the people who are disabled. And the reason they don't switch and say, hey, just go vote down here, it's because everything is organized within for their own little location that's closest to their house. So it's by neighborhood. And so if you switch that, it'll throw everything off. They're very serious about that. They do the same thing in Peru, where they do not allow the person to vote in a different mesa. They just take them upstairs if they're disabled and that sort of thing. And I also wanted to mention the transportation of the ballots. When they're being transported, the National Police is following these buses along, and each member or a representative of each party can go and also join. So it's like a giant caravan that happens all the way to when they're transporting the ballots. So we can't even we are not even allowed any of this in the United States. So how does the United States have the audacity, to actually begin criticizing elections that are far more transparent and superior than any elections held in the U.S. in modern times?
And by the way, Franco, the whole fact that you have to vote in your vote center, where you're designated to, is a good thing. I know people in the United States, well, look at the model in LA, you can vote wherever you're at. But in an audit situation, now it's a clusterfuck. Now you're not going to be able to track these ballots back, and you can really steal elections. There are like 12 different ways to rig election in America. There aren't many ways in Managua. I can't even think about how they would do it how they would try to steal an election. It would be almost impossible with the system they have and the security. And when you have everything down to one day, and we can do this in America, come on. We're the United States of America. You know, they say we're making it more accessible that you can go vote wherever you want. Yeah, but when it takes you 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, is that really accessible? Nobody's going to want to vote that way. They're going to forget about it. They're going to say, listen, I don't even know if my vote counts, and I got to wait 7 hours to do this. Hell no, I'm done with this whole system. It's not like that in Nicaragua. They get the counts in quickly. People go vote in one center. Like I said, these can be trackable, and they are just honest, fair, and transparent.
Yeah, it's easy for people to just want to walk away for if they're waiting there for all those hours. It sounds like a good model that what Nicaragua has for the U.S. to follow. And it's not like the U.S. doesn't have the resources. They definitely do have the resources. There's plenty of places like rec centers, elementary schools, middle schools for people to go to vote here in the United States, to take care of people in wheelchairs. We have elevators here to take them up. Like in Nicaragua, they had to carry these people. And even if places don't have it here in the United States, there could be volunteers that can help people that are handicapped. Anything to make these elections more secure and more transparent. Now, the final question I want to ask you guys here is, what was the lifestyle like there for the people? What would you guys say is was the community like? Like, was there a strong sense of trusting, of a strong sense of community? Where you guys, when you guys went to Nicaragua, would you guys want to live in Nicaragua forever?
I don't know, Frank. I don't know how you kind of figure that out. Yeah, I'm fucking in love with Nicaragua. I mean, I just, I didn't think I would be as in love as I am. It's not just a political aspect of it. It is the fact that I have never experienced what it's like to feel backed by your government. And those people experience it every day. They love their government. They love Ortega, almost to the point of reverence. And the youth loves him too. A lot of the people that protect him are Sandinistas. For instance, they don't really have like metal detectors and stuff when you go and see Ortega. And Johnny was like, "Hey, you guys you don't want to put metal detectors and stuff?" And one of the people we were with was like, "No, we don't want to do that. The Sandinistas protect him really well. They have this system of sort of community there that is so strong, where they all are Nicaraguans and they all back each other and they're very peaceful, and it's just great. Just to see people feel secured by their government is really nice. And Franco, I wanted to have Johnny come in to tell his experience a little bit. I do. And I just want to have him come in. So I'm going to say bye to your audience. And I'm going to have Johnny come on real quick. Thank you, Franco, for having me on.
Absolutely, Fee.
She pulled my move. I was going to try to do that and stuff like that. Not that I don't want to be on your show. Is that I've been doing shows this morning. I got to go to the bathroom.
Final question. I was going to ask Johnny to come on too. What's going on, brother?
You got to get Johnny's perspective, because Johnny has a great insight like this. The work he did in LA was amazing, so he can tell you some of this stuff. But just to let you know, when you asked about the people in Nicaragua, how I fell in love with it so quickly, because we went to Bilwi, which was in the Caribbean coast, the autonomous zone, indigenous people, whatnot. They were ravished by 2 hurricanes, and a lot of these people were poor, but they were happy. They didn't have all the resources that we might enjoy in America, but they were so humble. I mean, and more than anything, they were so proud to be Nicaraguan. You know what I'm saying? It was just an amazing experience. It was a life-changing experience for me, and I completely am in love with Nicaragua.
How you doing, Franco?
Doing well, brother. How you doing? It looks like you got tan.
I think it's just a camera. But yeah, I'm a little tan too.
I got red from that sun.
So what did you think of the experience and like the election process and everything while you were there?
Yeah, I mean, the whole process to go vote was really clean and simple, and it makes too much sense, is what I've been saying a lot. It just makes too much sense. Like, seeing that and comparing it to what we see in the United States, I'm just like, we don't have a fucking democracy in the United States. We don't have a fair process. And then here they are now. I mean, the U.S. Treasury came out to sanction certain people in the U.S. government today. I don't know if you guys heard about that. That came out today, citing Biden's pantomime election comments about Nicaragua's election, citing Biden's, saying that it was a sham election and it was not fair or democratic. And then it's like, well, the Convo couch was right there, completely showing exactly how it is. I don't know if you saw my tweet of my video of me going into a junta at a voting center, a room, basically, a classroom, and just showing how the whole process works. And Fee kind of explained it, but I have that video. It's like a 2-minute video. But yeah, I mean, it's just like a really clean process. People were delighted to participate in the democratic process. It's the feeling I got, and the thumbprints is another security thing that they've used in the Middle East. I know which country. I think it was Iran or.
I think it was Iran, but I'm not sure
I
completely.
saw-
but I mean, I thought
I
it was
think-
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I saw pictures of like people in Iran using fingerprints.
Yeah, it's not even fingerprints. They just mark it. They just mark your thumb. So then
Okay.
it's like, okay, you voted, so you can't vote again. Like that doesn't go away. Like I took a picture of one of our friends that we made out there, and it was still there like 36 hours later or 72 hours later, 3 days later, and that's just another security measure that I saw there. So yeah, overall, it's like a really clean process. I would have liked to seen the counting process. Unfortunately, because of traveling and stuff, we weren't able to see that part. But next time, I'm like making that a priority to
But
see.
you guys are able to, right? They allow you people to see the the counting process.
Absolutely. It was just like a traveling thing that happened this time. That we were like in the middle of traveling somewhere. So then, when they were closing at 7 p.m., they were like, that's when they count each classroom, each junta counts the ballots, and inside the juntas, and then they get a roster, and then for the voting center, and then those rosters get counted by Managua, or each local. It's junta to voting center to local to regional to then national.
And final question here, and we can start with you, Johnny, because I know Pasa might talk a lot about this one. Question here is, how is the food?
The food's decent. I mean, honestly, being here in Peru now, I'm like the Peruvian food. Peruvian food's world class, but Nicaraguan food is good. They had decent cheese, which I know as vegans we had to cheat a little bit. So I tried the cheese, but it's not like American cheese. Like I didn't really get sick off of that.
Yeah.
The cheese was like really fresh, and overall, I mean, the food was delicious, and a little bit of mixture of like jungle. How they have the what's it called, the plantains. So there was some of that plantains incorporated there, and apparently they have a lot of plantains, so they incorporated a lot in their food.
Yeah, pretty amazing. Very hard to be a vegan, and you don't complain when you're in South and Central America for the first time. You take what's given, you eat it, but pretty damn good, to tell you the truth. I mean, I ate a lot of rice and beans, a lot of plantains there as well. So I mean, it's pretty fascinating. I mean, I would still say that so far out of the gate here, I mean, the Peruvian food is so great here. It's very, very complex. I compare it to Italian food, that the flavor you get on the inside and then what's left on the backside is there. It's very evident. So you understand the cooking process, that they're putting many layers and taking time and love to go into their food here in Peru. But it was no sham in Nicaragua. And when we were in Bilwi over there, everybody was talking at the table how fresh their seafood was and how much they loved it. So I mean, it's simple, but there's, what I'm saying, it seems like, we went by the ports, whatnot, in Managua, we were by the Caribbean coast in Bilwi. The people are talking about how different it is. 15 years ago, they didn't have anything. It was just a mess. But the Sandinista government has built it up. And really, to tell you the truth, I encourage any American, get on a plane, go to Managua, have a good time, go visit Nicaragua. There are parts that we haven't visited yet that people are telling me you got to go on the Caribbean coast on some other parts. So I'm anxious to get back there and see what the whole Nicaragua is like. But from what I experienced and the food we had and the people, I'm blown away. It truly is amazing. And their election process at the end of the day is great. If we had that process, we'd have a different government.
And visit it, even though the CIA and all the deep state people tell you that it's dangerous and they're killing Americans and stuff. It's not.
Awesome.
It's pretty safe. I'd say it's safer than Peru.
That's what I hear from everyone who goes there, from people who live there. You guys had gallo pinto?
Yes.
In Nicaragua? Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Gallo pinto or taku taku? What's your preference?
Yeah.
Gallo pinto or taku taku? What's your preference?
Taco
It's
taco.
tough, right? I said that once, and like everyone who was there with me, because it was like my wife's side, they got mad at me for saying that at one point. But then after I ate it more, I did change my mind. Gallo Pinto. But yeah, guys, thank you guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, and stick around so we can like talk a little bit more after. And to everyone else, stay informed. Follow the Convo Couch. They do amazing work. Take care, everyone.
Love you,
Peace.
Margo. Love you.